I'm Ian. I work on the cardset team for Arena. To simplify, that's the part where you play Magic. I have been at Wizards for just a little over 5 years. All of that on Arena.
And I'm Chris. I'm the executive producer for Arena. I kind of help Ian and all of the other designers and folks make sure that the game gets out to all the players. I've been at Wizards for a very long time, 21 years.
Modern Horizons 3.
Arena Direct.
Modern Horizons 3 was a huge amount of work and a ton of fun to play. It's one of my favorite limited formats we've ever had in Arena.
I mean, I love Modern Horizons 3 Draft. I played the heck out of it. But Arena Directs for us is a kind of a form changer for how we want, Arena to interact with tabletop, and being able to have, digital tournaments that provide physical rewards was a great swing for us.
Modern Horizons 3.
Arena Directs.
Yeah, it turns out the good stuff is also often the hard stuff.
Yeah, which is kind of normal, right? We do hard things because we think they're going to pay off in the end. We talked, Ian and I and Jay Parker, the director of design, talked a lot about whether or not we were going to do Modern Horizons 3.
Yeah.
And if we could even do it. And we did a lot of work in the years prior just to set this up for success.
Yep, we were watching the development of Modern Horizons 3 way in its early days, and as soon as they locked down things like they were going to do colorless mana, we started implementing that in Arena like a full 2 years before Modern Horizons 3.
But we are a digital game, and we don't fulfill to individual customers very often, so there's a big learning curve in that space, and that's been a challenge. We actually want to run more directs than we've currently run because we're still working through some of the challenges, and it's taken a lot of time.
I mean, it is. It's Modern Horizons 3 again. That was a huge lift for the team. The number of mechanics and that. The average card set has something like between 3 and 6 mechanics, and Modern Horizons 3 had like 74. It's just like a huge amount of work in the middle of it's not like the rest of the year was light. Even without Modern Horizons 3, this was the busiest year for card releases since Arena started.
And while I was going to have Modern Horizons 3 on the list, it is just the amount of content that we put out this year.
Yeah.
Going back even to Cons of Tarkir last year, all of the sets we had this year, Modern Horizons 3, the stuff that's come, Foundations is coming, which is bigger than normal. Pioneer Masters is additive this year. So we just had a ton of stuff in the card set pipeline, way more than we've ever had before. Mm-hmm. And then there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that we're proud of that the players don't get to see as much of. Running those teams, getting them working together, infrastructure work that we've done over the year, which players don't technically see unless it impacts them. So otherwise, it's all working as expected, and that's all stuff that doesn't get shouted out enough. Because when we're talking to folks, it's more about like what are they interacting with.
Yeah, having the busiest card set year of all time, and still never crunching.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know that we could have gotten through this year doing anything differently. We kind of threaded the needle pretty hardcore on our team. Yeah, I think we kind of, what we did was what you had to do to get through this year.
So we launched deck sales this year. When we look at deck sales, we were very excited by the feature, but there's a lot of kind of fiddly bits about it, and we just didn't communicate that as well as I think we could have, where we see what the deck price is and what the discounts are and what players are going to pay for those things. It's just not super clear. And so I think there was an opportunity there to talk a little bit more about what that looks like or present that information a little bit better. That's the kind of thing that, to me, that is like, those are opportunities. What are we telling people, and how are we setting the right expectations so people aren't surprised when they see what we finally deliver?
I have one now. I started work on rooms early. I would have started it even earlier, like an extra 2 or 3 weeks more early than it already was. Oh, this past year, I'm actually really happy with how rooms came out. I think they play great. They're really clear as to how they work. I think we managed to clearly communicate things like, hey, this side is locked but still functional. You can unlock it. And we handled like color identity things that are really kind of hard to track in tabletop really effectively. It just took a lot of time to get right.
I'm super simple. I really loved our April Fool's pet, Dwayne. I think that's my favorite thing. Just such a little joyous nugget of fun, and that's really what we try to do.
I mean, for Modern Horizons 3, it was just sheer bulk of work. There's a handful of really, really complicated cards in there, and beyond that, there's just an astounding number of different mechanics and the amount of work you have to do around that. For standard sets, I think Duskmourn gets the prize there, where Duskmourn introduced rooms which are, you know, a different aspect ratio. And if you're thinking, yeah, but they're the same aspect ratio as battles, they're not actually. The art is a different size relative to things, and since we only show the art on the battlefield, that was its own bit of work, making that all stack up correctly and dealing with the fact that they can come in colorless, or they can come in with just one of the colors, even though there's another color on the permanent on the card. It's not active right now, and so that's not part of the color identity. Like
the behavior, we were talking about this, and the behavior of what happens when you flicker a room, or you know, exile and then return it to the battlefield, and it's like, oh, that's not what I would have expected. It makes total sense.
Yes.
But, you know, having it be both rooms are locked and it's a colorless permanent,
yes,
is a crazy outcome.
Which doesn't even get into like what happens when you animate one of them and then you mutate over the top of it, and then you make a token copy of that mutate creature which has rooms but doesn't have the room type line, and do they start locked or unlocked?
Super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one, and this is another case, this is a case of it being edge cases and odd behaviors. It's face down permanents, which started with Cons of Tarkir at the end of last year. But the number of weird things you can do with a face down permanent, where you mutate over it and then you blink it into exile and it comes back onto the battlefield, all that kind of stuff. You can cause a lot of weird behaviors, and getting the game to render everything correctly and not get confused about the fact that a permanent's face down. That was all a ton of work.
Yeah.
The single most challenging card, well, first of all, shout out to Underworld Breach for 5 years running being one of the most challenging cards to exist in Magic. The newest Underworld Breach bug is a couple days old, so that's fun. But Kiritz was the number one card for this year. And I know that Kiritz, you look at it and you're like, well, that's just Phyrexian mana. What's the big deal? And the answer is, first, that Phyrexian mana is only used to cast spells, whereas Kiritz can be used to pay mana anywhere, which means it needs to be plugged into every part of the mana payment system, all throughout. And the other part is that it looks like Phyrexian mana, but it's not. It's a different, more up thing. And you have to do so much extra work to make it behave. But also, players expect it to just be Phyrexian mana. So you have to have it look like a thing that it isn't. It's a hugely complicated card. There's all these things. It doesn't, like Phyrexian mana modifies what you're paying. It changes a 1 and Phyrexian black card to a 1 and 2 life, or a 1 and black as you decide. Kiritz doesn't do that. It just lets you pay the black with life. It's a whole nightmare thing. And even worse, it's not from a keyword. It's just from text on the cards. Keywords, you can hide all sorts of complexity in the background in code. Just parsing all the stuff that card does out of words on a card is a nightmare. I am very excited. We've had a few years of Pioneer Masters, and it's really nice to be able to not just say, we'll talk about it eventually. We can say that it's coming out this year. We will be done, and with it we will have the overwhelming majority of the cards people are playing in competitive Pioneer.
And that's one that we've talked about for a long time. As, you know, if you've been a player for a long time, you know that it's been on and off the roadmap. But, you know, finding that spot for it and finding a place where it made sense, and we had done enough work, again, pre-work. We talked about Modern Horizons being a lot of work. It also is partly what helps us deliver Pioneer Masters on the timeline that we're looking at.
Absolutely. Yeah, Pioneer Masters first showed up as a thing we were looking at, I think, early 2020.
Something like that, before I was on the team.
Yeah, and it was something we looked at, and then we analyzed and went, this is too big of a bite of work to take all at once right now, and we kind of had to instead focus on things like the remastered sets and building up Arena's pool of mechanics and capabilities until we were able to actually tackle something like that.
Yeah.
For my team, it's going to be a couple years of people asking me about multiplayer. When do we get 4-player in Arena? And the answer is, it'll take a while.
It'll take a while.
But we're working on it.
We are working towards it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We're working on being able to work on it.
Correct. Like, this is the plan for the plan.
Yeah.
We'll go back to setting expectations. This is going to take a lot of effort.
Yeah.
We are in the early stages. We don't have a full timeline yet on exactly when we think it's going to launch. It will not be in 2025.
No.
That is a guarantee. We will not be launching that in 2025.
I hope to have hired the people I need to do it in 2025 and then start working on it, and then some other year it will come out.
But yeah. But it is on our roadmap of we want 3 and 4 players in matches of Magic on Arena. It's just going to take some work to get there, make it fast and fun, and kind of do all of the things that Arena already does well. More short-term achievements we are wrapping up on, which are ways for players to engage in the game a little bit more granularly and have some, more things to do or shoot for. Some fun ways to engage with the game. It's probably going to be delivered early next year at this point. So it's not specifically on our 2024 list, but we talk about what we're proud of. The way that we got to the implementation of what achievements is going to be, I think was a really good process and is really fun. And so we'll be able to reward really cool gameplay experiences in a way that I didn't expect us to be able to do.
Yeah.
In general, I think we're in a pretty good spot. We've done some stuff over the last few years to make it rewarding for players who both play constructed and play limited draft, right? We added some bundles with MH3. We're changed a little bit how the Mastery web works to give people more options on how they collect things and what they prioritize. We're going to continue iterating. I think we're in a pretty good spot. There are some spots where golden packs, I think we're going to expand and open that up to all standard sets, so it's not just the most recent set that provides progress there. I think that gives players more flexibility. We're looking at, and I'm not sure which set this is going to happen is, but when we have bonus sheets with shifted rarities, we're going to look at not necessarily having everything be mythic rare, but more in line with their original printed rarities to make collecting easier and make it work like people expect it to work. Setting expectations is strong, and then, meeting those expectations is also part of that. So we're working on that. How we do duplicate protection and cosmetics is still a work in progress. We made some progress this year. We have more that we want to do to clean that up and make it easier for folks. Within the next couple of sets, probably. The biggest one is the duplicate protection and cosmetics one. That might be a little bit further horizon. It's going to be, but it's the last one in the list, so that might be Q1 or Q2 of next year, but those are all changes that are coming relatively soon.
There were foundational choices people made like 7-8 years ago in a world before booster fun and showcase styles and everything being nearly as common as they are, that turns out we need to redo some work there.
Yep. So definitely doing more Arena Directs next year is part of the plan. We want to make sure that experience is great for players. And the first 3 that we ran, for a portion of the players, it wasn't as good as it could be. So that's going to be one of the key factors in running more directs, but we do want to run more directs. We're always looking to work with the play team on what Arena's doing and how we're integrating with what Tabletop is doing and making sure that we're aligned. So we'll continue to do that and look for opportunities. I think there is a gap that we will look at, which is we have smaller scale tournaments and we have kind of the ranked ladder. I think there's a space to define those better and really reach out to players who are looking for an experience that I don't think we're fully delivering yet. I don't know what that looks like, but I know it's a space that we want to push on to make sure that there's more rewarding mid-level tournaments for folks who are competitive.
And on my end, it's, keeping up with something like 99.9% of the cards played in competitive Pioneer and delivering card sets people can play with and draft and bring into constructed.
Yeah. So we've run a handful of different experiments, and we're going to continue to run experiments until we find the thing that we think is the right thing. This year we've done both play standard in your local store and get rewards on Arena. We've done play 3 drafts in your local store, get a free draft on Arena. I think those are things that we really want to lean into. There's a couple things that we want to make sure that are true in that. One is it's easy for players, it's easy for stores, it's easy for us. So we want it to be as seamless as possible. That requires work on the back end of things to make sure that that's true. We're getting closer, but we're not there yet. So we're going to continue to lean into that. Magic Academy is coming with Foundations, and we want to participate in that and help build that connection between learn to play experience at a store, then you can come to Arena and practice your skills, and then there's going to be a follow-up event at the store. Now you have a little bit more experience and you can participate and hit the next step. We want to lean in and build those connections. We're working actively to do that. We're going to have to try and learn. We're going to miss the mark a few times probably before we get exactly where we want to be, but we're always moving forward in that space.
Seen a lot of players talking about the fact that there is a job listing up on this website right now for an Alchemy lead designer. As that indicates, we're planning to keep moving along with Alchemy. The format's been doing well. It's been doing what we want. It's a place where, especially in a world of 3-year standard, people who want an experience that changes a little more rapidly have somewhere to go. People who are ready to see new decks at a more steady pace.
Alchemy is a really important part of what we do. It engages a section of players very highly. Players who like it. It's a really good change of pace. Again, when we talk about the types of players we have, we're going to have some dedicated players who only play one thing, only play Brawl. That's great. We have a lot of players who need variety and need things to change up, and Alchemy is definitely one of those things that fits into that space. So when you're playing Standard for a while and you get bored with your deck, you want to try something new, Standard doesn't change as much. Historic doesn't change as much. Timeless definitely won't change as much. Right? So we want that format that allows people to come experience fun new things. It gives us a little bit of experience on what are cool places spaces to play in, what are some cool mechanics. We talk about, if we were doing this a couple years ago, I mentioned the deck sales thing and setting expectations around what we're trying to do with Alchemy. And again, I think we've talked internally a lot about it in the few years that Alchemy's been alive, around initially setting those expectations that we didn't do as good of a job as we could have. I think the other thing that it's worth talking about when we talk about what you could spend that time doing something else, right? But when we look at something like a Kiritz, which we may have spent more time on Kiritz than an entire Alchemy release would ever take up.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Because we get to build and design for Arena those Alchemy releases so they fit very cleanly in what we're doing. Mm-hmm. We work very closely with Studio X and the engineering team to make sure that we're making the right choices to make it very easy for us. So when we look at the kinds of cool things that we can do inside of tight windows and schedules, Alchemy is one of those things that's really a no-brainer for us.
Yeah, the bang for the buck on Alchemy is really big.
And I love seeing the crazy stuff that the team comes up with and some of the fun things. And when we miss, we can rebalance, which is nice. That's another thing when we talk about goals for next year is, building some tools and building some processes to let us rebalance more. We don't do it. This year was so busy that we didn't get to do it enough.
Yep.
I know Ian and the team feels the same way, which is we were just so heads down doing all of the card sets, the over 3,000 cards that we'll release this year. That rebalances just didn't fit.
Yeah.
We want to fix that.
Yep. And it's the only big rebalance we had this year was the historic post-MH3 rebalance that we did. I don't know how deep into metagrids people are, but the historic rebalance got us to a point where I don't think a single deck had more than like a 2.5% meta share, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's where we had to, take some action on the Boros deck and bring it in line with some of the other things.
Yep.
So, and we're we're seeing the same thing with balancing for even best of one. That's a spot where we will explore a little bit when we need to. With the ley line of resonance is a problem in best of one. So for Standard, we'll ban it, and we banned it, and for Alchemy, we'll rebalance it to get into a spot where it isn't so impressive, and then have access to it again, which is really fun for the people who like that kind of play. It's me. I'm a terrible person. I love that kind of play.
Well, one is continuing where we've got capacity to add commanders and face cards and other interesting things from the commander ancillary products that come out with our releases. And, we've talked about other structures for shipping. Brawl anthologies are a thing people bring up. Currently, the anthology structure and everything the content the team has built out for those assumes 4 copies of the cards, which makes a Brawl anthology kind of an odd shape, and figuring out the right way to do that and make sure that it works for people who do want to play those cards in 4X formats.
Yeah.
taking care of them as well is a problem that has not been cracked at this point.
So we saw last year with the Universes Beyond release that it really kickstarted Brawl's growth and hasn't stopped since. And so we want to lean into that and figure out the right way to do that. As we mentioned, the anthologies thing is a thing we'll need to solve for. It may not be a full anthologies. It may be more targeted, smaller. We don't know. We haven't figured out. We do know that we want to deliver more cards for that format. The structure of next year, which is a little bit more evenly spaced, gives us some flexibility, but we don't have specific plans yet. But we know it's going to be, we're going to want to look at things like anthologies or some other way to deliver some really Brawl focus cards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things we're looking at is improving some of the social tools we have in game. There's a lot we want to do in that space. When we launched the social tools, we kind of did a bare minimum to get out the door and support players. There's a lot more in that space that we want to do. And when we talk about making connections to tabletop, some of it's going to be in service to that, right? We want to be able to look at, have players engage with each other in the game, have social friend groups in the game, but we also want them to be able to represent their store and have stores do challenges and, what do leaderboards look like for social groups and other parts of kind of that experience. Then when we talk about long time horizons, why would we focus on that is we all think that's a core component and foundational to being able to make multiplayer Magic work ever. Talked a little bit about, how we do our planning and where you might see things that are informing, secretly informing things down the line, right? Cons of Tarkir is secretly informing things like Modern Horizon and letting us do some of that work early. Mm-hmm. We have foundational pieces that we build upon over time because one of our core goals is to build some systems that we extend and use for multiple purposes. One of the big things last year was the new player experience, improving that new player experience for players, and that also included behind the scenes a bunch of tools and framework that we're using to support achievements, right? So we build these connected things. You may not always see all of the pieces, but it takes time and planning, so we make sure that we're building foundational pieces over time, and so social is a foundational piece of multiplayer down the line.
Mm-hmm. Nothing of the scale that we've been doing, where we're doing a thing like Pioneer Masters, or we're doing the full set of cons or the remastered sets. That doesn't mean we're not adding any more old cards to Arena. That doesn't mean we're not going to do things like anthologies or come up with some new way to add cards that we think are worth adding. But next year, in terms of set releases, the 6 sets that are releasing next year. Can we say 6 sets? Maybe we can't. It'll be the sets that are coming out next year. I means that we're going to do, we have to make sure you can play every card in those sets.
Yeah, we're really excited by this change for Arena. One of the reasons we love being able to participate in all of the formats and having that just be a natural part of what we do. Mm-hmm. We look at some of the things we've done in the past and experiments we've run on non-standard legal sets, but standard legal sets are kind of the lifeblood of what Arena does. It was always part of its core intent was to be fast, fun, focusing on the most recent stuff. And this really leans into that for us, so we're very excited there. It also helps, right? So when we talked a little bit about changes to golden packs, right? That means every set that we release next year is part of this plan, right? Mm-hmm. It just reinforces all of the things that we think are really strong in the economy. Ian said that we may not there's no current plans for big backlist stuff, and that's true. That's partly because we've kind of reached one of the milestones, which it was, getting to Tournament Pioneer. We know that the other milestones are very far away. We may eventually put those on our roadmap, but they're so far away, it's not worth talking about.
Yeah.
So really being able to lean into the frontless sets and experiences, across the board is going to be really good for us.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest one for me is thanks. I really enjoy what I do. I love working on this team, and without the folks playing the game, that's not a job.
Similar for me. Like I mentioned, I've been here for 21 years. I don't do that without really loving what I do and who I work with and why we do this, which is to celebrate this game that we all love and make it as awesome as possible. We know that we have a lot of work to do, but we're encouraged by how we engage players, and many players are super receptive to what we're doing, and it shows. Like we're able to continue to add things to the calendar and grow and make plans for, a lot of companies will plan for the next year or the next, couple of years. And we're like, if we are not planning for at least 10 years, we're doing it wrong because we're going to be around that long.